Hey everybody, it's Jessica and welcome back to the Ebony Escape. And I believe a couple of videos ago I talked about the importance of finding story in my Doodle podcast and figuring out the stories of your life, including like the stories of your real life as well as the stories that you enjoyed growing up, like books, movies, TV shows, or whatever. And today I have actually done that. And so I decided to go really hardcore with this. And basically I thought of doing this as an assignment because of this pep talk I listened to. This podcast that I listened to that's called the Creative Pep Talk, and the host is this dude named Andy J. Pizza, and he is really awesome. And for, I think, episode 347, I think that's correct, he was saying that basically you should go back and investigate the stories that made you from like real life as well as like the fictional stuff. For right now, I've decided to investigate the stories that I loved as far as like books and movies and all that kind of stuff is concerned. So this is not all the stories because I couldn't possibly think of all the stories, but these are the ones that I remembered or that I came across and added to this timeline in Notion. So basically, I've made this timeline here, and I can look through the timeline of my life, and it's really interesting because when I looked through this, I was like, wow, this is literally my life. And so, let's get into it. So basically, for the first story, it's this children's book called Baby Bop, Where Are My Shoes? I don't think I have a copy of this book. My mom might have a copy of the book. But essentially, it was this children's book about this character named Baby Bop. And if you grew up watching Barney the Purple Dinosaur, Baby Bop was one of the characters on there, and she was like a triceratops that had on ballet shoes. And this book was about her trying to find her shoes, and she didn't know where her shoes were at. And I think before I was 2 years old, is when I started reading. But I started reading in secret, and I, for some reason, didn't want anyone to know that I could read. And this is being told to me. I do not remember this. But basically, I started reading really early, and I taught myself to read before I was 2 years old. Started reading Baby Bop, Where Are My Shoes? And the only reason my parents found out is because my mom caught me. She saw me sitting on the floor in the room from behind or something, and I was just looking at the book, and I was reading it and flipping the pages and just saying the words clearly and everything. And she was just like, well, I didn't do that. Like, my parents definitely were like doing the regular stuff of like trying to like teach me the alphabet and like how to grow up in being a child and all that kind of stuff, but they were just as surprised as I was like some years ago to learn that I started reading that early. So stories have been a part of my life for a long time. The fact that I could read, I kept it a secret. I don't know why at less than 2 years old I felt like I couldn't establish trust with something like that, or why I decided I wanted to be a secret. I don't know if it's just a playful kid thing or what, but I decided to keep it a secret. I don't know. That's something maybe a deeper investigation or food for thought. But that was like the first story that I can recall that I interacted with in one of the first children's books, if not the first children's book that I ever had. So that is the first story. So now we're in 1997, and now the next story is Cinderella from 1997. So I was like, I guess 2 years old at the time, and this is my favorite version of Cinderella. I love it so much that I have the DVD for it. I love this Cinderella so much because it was Brandy, it was Paula Maltaban, it was Whitney friggin' Houston, it was Whoopi, it was Bernadette Peters, it was everybody. Like, I loved that cast, and that was before I knew or had the idea of thinking, oh, these are actors playing parts. To me, as the kid, I was thinking the story was real, and so I wasn't invested in like, oh my gosh, it's Bernadette Peters, or oh my gosh, it's Brandy. I was just like, I think Brandy's so pretty, and she's such a pretty Cinderella. And so it was really cool for one of my first experiences of being exposed to a princess is seeing a black girl with like micro braids, and she was like considered desirable. But outside of like that kind of talking about that kind of stuff, when I was younger, I was just so enchanted by it. I loved the costumes, particularly in the ballroom scene, all the blue and purple gowns. I really loved that vibe. I loved the set design. The way that the world looked was just so pretty and storybook-esque. It kind of makes me think of Kanuko Craft and her illustration style. She is an illustrator, and she illustrated some children's books that I read, including Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, and I really love that style. So I don't know, maybe there's a tie-in there, but I really loved Cinderella, and I loved how, like, they didn't care about color, basically, because, listen, the queen was black, the king was white, and that child was Filipino, and nobody cared, and I just love that so much. It just is so magical, and I just love how that movie is. If I could make something that makes me feel that kind of magic again, I don't know what that would be, but I just love that movie. Like, I love how enchanted it seemed, how the set was. It just was so special. And of course it's still special because they're still like celebrating, and they just had their anniversary for it. And seeing Whitney Houston as like the fairy godmother, I didn't know she was Whitney Houston, and I didn't know Brandy was Brandy. I didn't know who any of the people were. I just thought they were all amazing, and I thought the story was so enrapturing. We actually recorded it on a VHS, and the way that I would watch it back is because it was like a straight to TV kind of movie. So we recorded it on VHS, and I would like put it in and watch it all the time. But now I just like have it as a DVD. But I got that before Disney Plus said they were going to have it on Disney Plus. So now I just have like a physical copy on my shelf, and that just makes me happy alone. So as far as like that story of my life, I think that informed me early on because I wanted so badly to have that kind of magic, and I was already seeing that kind of magic exist through a lens of like a multicultural or multicolored kind of world. I mean, black, white, Filipino, everybody was in there, and I just thought that the story was so magical, and for some reason that story is so magical to me, and I just love it. And also, as I grew up and I learned about the cast and stuff like that, I still love to follow Bernadette. Whitney, even though she's gone, I still love her music, and she's inspired a lot of other stories that I'm writing because of like certain songs just have inspired certain books, like Guardians that I'm writing right now. A lot of her music has inspired Guardians. And Brandy, like, she's amazing too. I love her stuff, and I love following her, and she's always gonna be like my Cinderella and like my princess. And I mean, at 2 years old, it's kind of hard to get that image out of your mind. So like, I've always found it inspiring, and I wish we could get back to that kind of magic. So I guess maybe that's part of the story of my life, that I wish I could get back to that magic, and whatever it is in whole or in parts about that story feels like the kind of magic that I would love to achieve as a storyteller. Rocket Power. And Rocket Power, I don't remember all the specifics, but basically it was this story about these kids who would skateboard in Hawaii. I think I may be completely wrong about that. I'm not looking up anything for this yet, but it was these kids who would all skate. Some of them roller skated, some of them rollerbladed. One of them had a scooter, and they'd all do these cool tricks and stuff like that. And they had like rival kids that they would skate against. And I don't know, I just love that show so much. It was so fun, and it was very much reminiscent of the time when kids would be outside more, or felt safer to be outside than it is now. But it was like kind of grunge, and there was this girl on the show that I thought was cool. She, I think, had like purple hair that maybe stylistically is reminiscent of dreads, and she had her like helmet on and knee pads and like cargo pants, and I think she skateboarded. Yeah, and I thought they were all so cool, and I think that show was supposed to be taking place in Hawaii. I could be so wrong about that. I feel like it was some island. I feel like it was Hawaii. But that show just looked like freedom and fun and just being outside. And I think that has definitely influenced me. I don't know about like writing stories wise, but I did just buy a pair of roller skates, some yellow roller skates, and I'm going to I am learning how to use them. I actually went to the park to like try them out, and I'm still very early, like I'm duck walking early, but I missed being outside and just like going outside and doing things. I've been stuck at my desk doing computer things so long for my major that it feels nice to like go outside and remind myself like, hey, go to the park or take a walk or be amongst the bees and the trees or whatever. And it's been really nice. So I think that show maybe has been in the back of my mind, influencing me to like go outside and like have fun outside. So that's that. For the next show on the lineup, we have Dragon Tales. And as far as this show is concerned, it was about these two kids, a brother and a sister. I don't remember their names, but they would go to this alternate universe where there were dragons that existed. And like they had this magical dragon scale, and they would say this like rhyme or some sort of like incantation, I guess, and they would be like, I wish to something take part, to be in a world of dragons and a land apart, something like that. And they would go and they would be with these dragons, and basically it was a lot about reading and comprehension and like life lessons and like trying to teach your kid how to be a good human. And I believe that the show was also trying to teach Spanish as a second language. I might be making that up, but I think that that's true. And so that definitely influenced me because I really love fantasy now. And so, of course, I would want to incorporate fantasy because I'm like, yeah, let's go to a land apart where there's dragons and we just chill and talk and learn Spanish. So I really enjoyed that show, and it was really a fun time. You know, Saturday morning cartoons and all that good stuff. Ooh, okay. Next one is Kim Possible. And that show ran from June 7, 2002 to September 7, 2007. And I loved that show. That was back when Disney Channel was Disney Channel. And I mean, Disney Channel is still Disney Channel now. But I'm going to be an old head, and I'm going to be like, your Disney Channel of you youngins is not our Disney Channel. I'm sorry. You didn't have Xenon and them and everybody. I'm sorry. But Kim Possible was so fun because, and a lot of what I'm realizing with these shows, especially like Cinderella and I guess Kim Possible, there are a lot of things that you feel limited on what you'd be able to do or what stories are meant for you now, but there was a lot of like stories that were actually pushing the envelope back then. And it's kind of crazy because Kim Possible was about like this teenage girl who's like a super spy, and her skills are so good that in between doing, I guess, high school and being a cheerleader and all this stuff and hanging out with her friend Monique, I think she was called, she would like jet across the world and like deal with the supervillain Draken and Shigo and whatnot. And I'm just like, that was actually really forward thinking for the time, you know, because a lot of stuff that we have as far as gendered roles and stuff like that is like, girls can't be super spies and teenage girls certainly can't be super spies. But the thing that was really cool about Kim Possible is like, yes, she could get down and dirty and like sneak through a swamp to get to a secret lair, but she also liked to get her hair done and paint her nails and go shopping. And she wasn't saying, I don't think she was being toxic in any way as far as saying like, okay, in order to have a gritty job like this, I can't be a girly girl. And she did both. And there was like no shame in the combination of them both. And I think that that's probably an important takeaway that I should have, because I think growing up in middle school, I started to recognize that if you were into girly things, that you were less likely to be respected. But if you were into more neutral / boyish things, you were likely to be more respected. Now that doesn't say like if you're a boy and you're into boyish things, you're going to be respected. But if you're a girl and you're into boyish things, you might be like scolded and say, why aren't you into girly things? Because I distinctly remember not wanting to, like, they had gendered t-shirts, and there were like these pink t-shirts and these gray t-shirts, and I remember getting the gray t-shirt because I was like, I want to be different, I don't want to be girly, because I don't think I had the language for it at the time, but I think that I associated girly with like less power or less respect. And so I was like, well, I want to be respected, so I'm going to like absolve myself of this. How society perceives me was maybe more important than how I wanted to express myself, or I wanted to like try to find a balance for that, and I didn't have the words for it, so I was just trying to grapple for what I saw seemed to be working for others. And maybe that's too much of a deep dive, but I don't know. But as far as Kim Possible is concerned, it was a really fun show. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, Kim Possible was a fun show. It showed that I wasn't even thinking about it that deep at the time because it was just like, it's a fun show. But you could be a teenage girl who likes to paint her nails, get her hair done, and go shopping. And you could also be a nitty-gritty super spy that can like creep through a swamp and like beat up supervillains whose hands lit on fire. And had a bunch of siblings that also had their stuff too. But that was a fun show. I really liked that. Oh, this next one, Barbie as Rapunzel. This heavily influenced Guardians of Mass and Memory. Like, Barbie as Rapunzel, I thought was such a cool take. Like, and I still think it's such a cool, refreshing take. Because, like, the original story of Rapunzel is, like, this girl up in the tower, this lady who's a witch who like kidnaps her because like the father snuck into the garden and took some herbs for his wife or whatever. And so the witch like kidnapped her and took her, or they made an exchange. I don't remember exactly. With Barbie as Rapunzel, the reason why I thought that taking Rapunzel was so interesting is like, first of all, she had a friend that was a dragon whose daddy dragon watched the grounds, the magical grounds that she was staying on. She was kidnapped in this version as well, but she had a magical paintbrush. And you don't understand, like as an artist, to be like, she had a paintbrush and she could paint on the walls and then make whatever it was real. Like she went through like this fashion montage where she was painting dresses. She walked into the wall, walked back out of the wall, and the dress was real and tangible and corporeal and on her body. And I was just like, this is so amazing. Who thought of this? I thought it was so cool. And then she painted a portal on her wall as well. Or like she painted what she wanted the outside world to look like or what she thought it looked like. And so she walked through it and she was able to leave the tower, to leave the estate and leave Gothel and stuff. And it was just so cool. I thought it was so cool. So I was like, I want a magic paintbrush. And so like my attitude was like, well, I want that. So I took that and made my own interpretation of it years later with Guardians. Sometimes we feel like, oh man, I wish that the worlds that I created were real. And she literally could make them real. She painted them and they were real because it was a magic hairbrush and then it was a paintbrush. And it was just, I thought it was so cool. I love that story. Codename Kids Next Door. That one, I don't really know if I have too big of a significant contribution from that, other than that repeating the same narrative of like kids being outside and using their imagination and how everything was like so serious and they had like a fortress and it was just like, y'all, you're in a tree house, you're 10, calm down. But they were all fun, number 1 all the way to number 5 and everybody. But yeah, that show was very fun because it showed how kids can like extrapolate their imagination and make something out of nothing. Like they were just in a treehouse, right? They're just in a treehouse, but it was their fortress and they were always looking out for stuff or like trying to fortify their fortress so they were in battle with other kids. So it was always a whole lot of fun. That's so Raven. I did not realize how forward thinking some of those episodes were on that show. I did not realize it. Like, there was an episode where Raven wanted to like apply for a job in a boutique to work there, but the lady wouldn't let her do it. And she was thinking that it was because she was black, because I think the lady was trying to follow her around the store and stuff like that. So she hired Chelsea. Chelsea wore like a secret webcam. Chelsea's Raven's friend. She wore like a secret webcam to record what the lady was saying. And the lady was like, I don't trust black people, or something about black people. Like, she was basically being racist. And like it got reported on the news later within the show, and it was so cool, like so forward thinking. And I wanted to be a fashion designer as well when I was a little kid, and so I saw Raven in her funky funkadelic psychedelic super colorful bedroom, and I was like, girl, I want me some that. She had all these clothes in her sewing machine and entered these fashion contests and stuff, and I just thought she was so cool because I was like, I wanted to be a fashion designer. I never did become a fashion designer because family pressures and stuff like that, and I'm not trying to like harp or anything, but basically it was just like, there's no future in fashion design, you won't make money. Like, I just listened, and it was also told to me like, well, if all you want to do is fashion design, then I don't understand why you're going to college and wasting money and stuff like that. Not wasting their money as in my parents, but like saying that it wouldn't make sense to get a higher education because you don't need a higher education to be a fashion designer. But that was then. And I think we can all relate to our parents being apprehensive of us like pursuing certain dreams and goals because they don't seem traditional. And now, like, my parents definitely have like a different way of thinking about things, but still, like, it hurt my soul a little bit. But you see my body, my mannequin back there. I have thoughts and plans. Am I terrified and have not done anything with it? Yes, but I have the mannequin. So it's there. She's there. But yeah, that show made me want to be a fashion designer and made me really love fashion. And I didn't realize that I was getting spoon-fed a lot of good ideas, thoughts about society and racism and sexism and feminism and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of that going on in that show, and I didn't realize it. until looking back, and I was like, you know what? They was doing some good stuff on that show. So I really appreciate that from Not So Raven. That was a fun, informative show, and I really love Raven's character because she strove so hard to be herself and basically didn't give a dang about what anybody else said, and I too would like to be like that. Cheetah Girls came out. Again, I did not realize what a big deal this was. I didn't read the book Cheetah Girls, I just saw the movie on Disney Channel, and it was just these 4 friends, multicultural, different ethnic backgrounds, each with their own different stories and different things going on, and they were just sisters from another mister. They were really tight like that, and I really admired that connection and wanted to have a connection like that as well. And also I like to sing, so I wanted to like sing and dance like they did, and I thought it was really fun. And I loved how at the end of the day, when they were offered to like have a deal but like separate Raven out and everything, they decided, well, Raven's character, they decided that they didn't want to like go with the guy in the movie who wanted to like kick her out of the group. They decided to like stick together, and they had like that cool impromptu on street music video in the middle of the traffic and everything, and the electric guitar. It was really good. Like, we are sisters, we stand together. That was some ish. Y'all know nothing about that. that was really good. It really, I think, enforced me wanting to like have multicultural connections to bridge and make us stronger. We are in a time when people are angry with Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, simply, for one example, because there's a black elf, among other things. And that should tell it all right there. So this show I really love because they were friends regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their race, and they stick together and they were tight. And I loved the Cheetah Girls movie, and I loved the Cheetah Girls series. I know there's other stuff that went around in the franchise and behind the scenes, but I'm talking about the story, I'm talking about on camera. I loved what that story gave me and what it made me feel and how it contributed to my childhood. Oh my gosh, one of my favorite things, Avatar: The Last Airbender. So Avatar: The Last Airbender came out February 21st, 2005, I guess was the first episode, and the last episode was July 19th, 2008. This was one of the first shows that I was dedicated to. Like, I wanted to make sure I finished my homework on time. I was like, Mom, please, I need to watch the show. And my dad and I would talk about it too, because he liked that kind of stuff too. Avatar: The Last Airbender, I loved so much because it's such a great example of story. And that was one story that I saw where I was like, I want to make something like this. And I'm not trying to say this as like a way to like be arrogant or something like that, but other creators out there can relate and understand what I mean when I say like, you see something so good that you're like, oh, if I can make something like half as good as that, or I want to pursue the path that leads to a thing like this. I loved Avatar: The Last Airbender so much. I still love it. And I just think it's such an amazing story because it draws off of real cultures and real like fighting styles and stuff like that. And I didn't realize how much it drew off of like these different styles and stuff like that. And it definitely influenced Guardians because like how they have water bending, I have my own type of bending that I'm trying to like infuse in my own book. How they have a spirit world, I wanted to have like my own kind of spirit world and that kind of thing. And their mythological creatures, which I think was rooted in like actual historical creatures mixed with like some creation for the sake of story and everything. It's just such a well-rounded story because not only is the main character banging as far as like everything's well-rounded and we've got a great character here and a great story for him, the secondary characters, like secondary protagonists, also are well-rounded and have great character arcs and great story. And the characters that are like tertiary and are like on the side and aren't like the people that are going to be there throughout the whole story that we're focused on, they mattered and their stories were important, all the way from the two lovers who were in the cave who were separated by war trying to find each other via the badger moles, to the lady who was teaching Katara bloodbending and manipulated her, to the guy who killed Katara's mother. Every person that they mentioned mattered. Even if they didn't like dive into it and they just like kind of alluded to something, everything mattered. everything was of substance, and I thought it was such a great story. It's such a good story. I love Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's so good. It's so good. Next story, Beauty and the Beast. So I remember seeing this in theaters, I think, at an IMAX. I don't know if it was like on a second anniversary kind of thing, because Beauty and the Beast came out... The VHS came out in 1992 and it came into theaters in 1991. But I remember seeing it in theaters. I don't know if it was one of those summer programs that they have sometimes where they have like $1 movie. And I remember seeing Beauty and the Beast and I was so enchanted. And it goes figure now, because Glenn Keane is also one of my favorite artists and animators, and I love looking at his work too. I was enraptured by the animation, but I didn't have the language for it at the time because I didn't know about like animation. I didn't know what it took to make pictures move. And I actually did research on it later in college, and like the ballroom scene. The ballroom is a 3D modeled space, and Belle and the Beast are hand-drawn in that 3D modeled space. That's amazing. And then at the end, not going back a little bit, even the brooms dancing and the Human Again scene when they're all like a big group of them just like ballroom dancing together, all the brooms. I thought that was really cool and really beautiful too. And I just love the sense of scope and how big the castle was and the setting, and it felt like you wanted to go in there and look. And also the library, like going to the end. What I thought was so fascinating was the transformation section for Beast, or Adam, and how like the lights were shooting down and his body was being raised, and then like his feet were glowing, hands were glowing, face was glowing, and how he like changed over. And I thought that was such a beautifully animated sequence. And then later, of course, I'm fascinated with Glenn Keane, the person who was a big part of that. And so I also didn't realize that he was like hearkening on, I think, either one or the other, a mix of Baroque and Renaissance when he was like crafting the look for Adam at the end, because it does give Baroque and Renaissance, and those are like my two favorite movements, and maybe third being Rococo. So that movie definitely influenced me wanting to look into animation and the magic and technicalities of making pictures move, and creating like digital assets and stuff like that, and making story with them. But I was also really interested in how do you make that magic? Like, I didn't have the language for it at the time, but I was like, how do you make this magic? Or I was even interested in like when you have an animated movie and then you have a sequel, and the sequel looked different, and it was because like the drawing quality was different and like the frames are different. But I didn't have the language for that, but I was always asking questions and fascinated. I was like, well, why does the original look like this? And the second one looks like that. And I didn't know it was because it was different in technology or frame rates and coloring. I didn't know it was all that. So this was definitely one of those movies that sparked my inspiration, not just because like there were things in the movie that I could relate to, like wanting to go on adventures or wanting to have a giant library, but because I loved the way that it looked, and I was like, how does it look like this? And then it led me to ask questions technologically and artistically later. So that's definitely how Beauty and the Beast influenced me. So Romeo and Julio it's a book by Sharon M. Draper, and it came out originally in 1999, and this was the first interracial romance I'd read, while Cinderella was the first interracial romance I'd seen. And the thing that's interesting about this, the way that I read the book was, I was in 6th grade, and we were doing end of year testing, and our class had all finished our tests, but there were some other people campus-wide who hadn't finished the test. So if your test isn't done, everybody has to stay in the classroom and wait for everyone to be done so we can determine the time for dismissal and all that kind of stuff. So my teacher, Miss Montjoy, had a crate of books, and she was just like, pick a book and just read a book. And I mean, it wasn't a problem for me because I love to read anyway. So I just looked, and I came across this book called Romeo and Julio. And so when I read it, I was immediately enraptured, because I was like, Romeo's a black girl like me, she got braids and everything and whatnot. So Romeo and Julio was like about this black girl named Romeo and this dude named Julio, and I believe he's from Texas and he's Mexican, I don't remember his specific racial background, but the point was it was interracial and they felt a connection. Romeo was a little hesitant at first. They met in like a chat room and they were like talking on like AOL or something, and it was just really cute and organic, and I really loved the story. And so I just really gravitated towards it, and it felt like a fresh reinterpretation of Romeo and Juliet, and I hadn't gotten into that story by Shakespeare that deeply yet, but I loved that story, and I had to give the book back to my teacher when we were done, and I didn't finish reading it in that one sitting, so I went to the bookstore with my mom one day and I saw it, and I was like, Mom, it's that book, because I'd been talking about it. So we bought the book, I read it, and I still have a copy that is a paperback, so it's all like worn down, and I love it when a book's worn down because it shows that it's been loved. So like that story like reinforced the idea of multicultural harmony, and it was also a beautiful storytelling, probably like I could say a core story to my childhood, and it just really like enchanted me at the time, and I still love that story. So yeah. Okay, so we've been almost going for like an hour now. I don't know what it's going to be cut down into when I edit this, but I feel like this is something that should be broken up into 2 parts. But next time I'm going to be picking up on the short animation Paperman from Disney. And I'm not going to get into that right now. I'll get into that in the next video. But basically, I'm pretty glad with the exercise that I've done thus far as looking at the timeline of stories of my life. And so far, it feels very much that I was very much about connection, and particularly like connection amongst friends or between cultures and different ethnicities and stuff like that. And I was also really a fantasy fan, and a fan of like bringing what could be in the mind into reality in like substantial, well-rounded story. And I think that has influenced me by making me want to be a good storyteller. I think a good portion of the cartoons that I've watched, particularly like the kids cartoons where there are kids like outside playing, have never really left my spirit as far as like I want to continue to imagine my Bridge of Terabithia. I still want to like go outside and make things feel a lot more grander than they are. I still want to like do that. I still want to have like that kind of romantic look on life and that kind of flight of fancy. So I still want to be childish in some ways and like learn to live and have fun again. I still want to like immerse myself in good story and make good story and use that as a vehicle to talk about connection and learning, whether that's just like between friends on just a friends thing or a love thing or between cultures thing or all the above, whatever that Venn diagram looks like or what have you. I'm really glad with what I've talked about so far, and it's fun to recount the stories. But until the next time, thank y'all so much for watching, and I hope y'all have a good day, night, whatever it is, and remember to keep creating, keep escaping. Love y'all. Bye.